Tonight, we begin a long and gentle journey through one of the most fascinating stories in human history, the story of the Roman Empire. As you listen, allow your body to relax, breathe slowly and deeply, and let your mind drift into calmness. This is not just history, it is history told for rest, peace, and sleep. Close your eyes, and let us travel back in time, more than 2,500 years ago. The legend tells us that Rome began with two brothers, Romulus and Remus. Abandoned at birth, carried by the currents of the Tiber River, they were rescued by a she-wolf who nursed them until a shepherd found them. Raised in the wild, the twins grew strong, proud, and ambitious. In time, they decided to build a city where their story had begun. But destiny would turn brother against brother. Romulus killed Remus, and in his brother's memory, named the new city Rome in the year 753 before Christ. This legend is powerful, but behind the myth lies history. Rome was first just a small collection of huts on 7 hills, surrounded by forests and swamps. The people were farmers, herders, and warriors. They traded with neighbors, the Etruscans to the north and the Greeks to the south. Slowly, the little settlement grew. It became a kingdom, ruled by a line of kings, both Etruscan and Latin. For 2 centuries, kings reigned over Rome. They built temples, drained swamps, and created the early Forum, the heart of Roman life. But power is fragile. In 509 BC, the Romans, weary of kings, rose against their ruler, Tarquin the Proud. They swore never again to be ruled by a monarch. Thus was born the Roman Republic. The Republic was a bold experiment, a government of citizens guided by elected officials called consuls and advised by a council of elders, the Senate. Power was balanced, shared, and constantly debated. The Romans valued discipline, order, and above all, service to the state. Every male citizen who owned land could be called to fight for Rome, and fight they did. Year after year, Rome marched to war, conquering neighbors across Italy. Life in the Republic was both harsh and disciplined. Roman soldiers trained endlessly, carrying heavy armor and marching long distances. Farmers worked the fields by day and returned to their duties as citizens in the evening. Families were led by the paterfamilias, the oldest male, who held absolute authority. Religion was woven into daily life. The Romans prayed to Jupiter, Juno, Mars, and countless household gods for protection, harvests, and victory. Over centuries, Rome grew stronger. It defeated the Etruscans, allied with some Latin tribes, and crushed others, but greater challenges awaited. In the south, the Greek colonies of Magna Graecia resisted Roman expansion. Rome fought, adapted, and eventually triumphed, learning the art of Greek warfare and absorbing Greek culture. By the 3rd century BC, Rome controlled the Italian peninsula. Its armies were feared, its discipline unmatched. But across the sea lay a rival power, one that would shape Rome's destiny for centuries to come. That power was Carthage, the great trading empire of North Africa. And soon, the two giants would clash in wars that shook the Mediterranean world. Rome had mastered Italy, but across the sea, another power was waiting. Carthage, a wealthy city on the coast of North Africa, ruled the waves of the Mediterranean. Its merchants traded from Spain to Sicily, and its navy was unmatched. Rome was strong on land. Carthage was powerful at sea. And soon, their rivalry would ignite into war. This struggle became known as the Punic Wars, 3 wars stretching over a century that would decide who ruled the Mediterranean world. The First Punic War began in 264 BC over the island of Sicily. Rome had no great fleet, but it built one. With determination, Roman engineers copied captured Carthaginian ships, adding the corvus, a boarding bridge that turned sea battles into infantry duels. After more than 20 years of hard fighting, Carthage surrendered Sicily, and Rome had taken its first step beyond Italy. But Carthage was not broken. In the Second Punic War, Carthage struck back with a general whose name would echo through history: Hannibal Barca. Hannibal led his army across Spain, through Gaul, and over the towering Alps, with elephants and soldiers alike. It was a march so daring that even the Romans were stunned. At the battles of Trebia, Lake Trasimene, and Cannae, Hannibal crushed Roman armies. Tens of thousands of Romans fell, and for a time, it seemed Rome itself might be lost. Yet Rome did not yield. The Republic endured losses with iron resolve. It refused to negotiate. It refused to surrender. Instead, Rome raised new armies year after year, wearing Hannibal down. A Roman general, Scipio, later called Africanus, carried the war to Africa. At the Battle of Zama in 202 BC, Scipio defeated Hannibal, and Carthage was humbled. Rome had proven its resilience, its discipline, and its destiny. A third Punic War followed half a century later. Though Carthage was weak, Rome's hatred burned strong. In 146 BC, the city was besieged, stormed, and destroyed. The Romans sowed salt into its fields, and Carthage vanished from the earth. That same year, Rome also crushed Corinth in Greece, making itself the master of both East and West. From Spain to Asia, Rome's shadow stretched across the known world. But empire brought new challenges. Wealth poured into Rome, along with slaves, treasures, and foreign customs. Old farmers lost their land to great estates owned by the rich. Crowds of poor citizens filled the city, restless and angry. Corruption grew in the Senate, and the balance of the Republic began to crack. It was in this world of ambition and turmoil that Julius Caesar rose. Born into a noble family, but not the richest, Caesar possessed charm, intelligence, and unshakable determination. He rose through the ranks of Roman politics with speeches that inspired and promises that dazzled. As a military commander, he led legions into Gaul, modern France, and conquered vast territories. His campaigns were brutal, but his soldiers adored him. He shared their hardships, marched with them, and rewarded their loyalty. Caesar's fame and power grew too great for the Senate to ignore. Some saw him as a hero, others as a threat to liberty. In 49 BC, when ordered to disband his army, Caesar instead marched across the Rubicon River with his legions declaring, "The die is cast." Civil war erupted. Caesar's genius in battle led him to victory. He defeated his rival Pompey, chased him to Egypt, and returned to Rome as master of the Republic. He introduced reforms, granted citizenship, restructured debts, and planned grand projects. But with power came envy and fear. On the Ides of March, 44 BC, senators who once called him friend turned against him. In the theater of Pompey, Caesar was stabbed 23 times. His last breath marked not only the fall of a man, but the end of the Republic itself. The death of Julius Caesar left Rome in chaos. The Republic was wounded, the Senate divided, and the people uncertain of the future. But Caesar's death did not end ambition. It fueled it. His supporters and enemies clashed once more, and civil war consumed the Republic. Among Caesar's heirs was a young man named Octavian, his adopted son. At first, few saw him as a leader. He was sickly, quiet, and only 19 years old. Yet Octavian was patient, intelligent, and determined. He forged alliances, first with Mark Antony, Caesar's loyal general, and with Lepidus, another powerful Roman. Together, they formed the Second Triumvirate, ruling Rome as three masters. But power rarely remains shared. Rivalries grew, Lepidus faded from the stage, and Octavian clashed with Antony. Antony had allied himself with Queen Cleopatra of Egypt, and Rome feared his loyalty had shifted eastward. In 31 BC, their armies met at the Battle of Actium, a naval clash on the coast of Greece. Octavian's fleet triumphed. Antony and Cleopatra fled to Egypt, where they took their own lives. Now, Octavian stood alone. In 27 BC, the Senate granted him the title Augustus, the revered one. Though he claimed to restore the Republic, true power rested with him. He was princeps, the first citizen, commander of the armies, master of Rome. Thus began the Roman Empire. Under Augustus, peace returned. This era, called the Pax Romana, the Roman peace, lasted more than 2 centuries. Roads stretched across the empire, binding distant lands together. Aqueducts carried water into great cities. Temples, theaters, and forums rose in marble splendor. The people, weary of war, welcomed stability. Life under Augustus was carefully balanced. The Senate still met, elections still occurred, but all knew the emperor held final authority. Augustus ruled wisely, with patience and moderation. He reformed taxes, strengthened the frontiers, and encouraged the arts. Poets like Virgil, Horace, and Ovid filled the empire with words that still echo today. Virgil's Aeneid told the story of Rome's divine destiny, linking Augustus to the hero Aeneas himself. For ordinary Romans, daily life thrived. Markets bustled with goods from across the empire: olive oil from Spain, glass from Syria, grain from Egypt. In the Colosseum's early games and in amphitheaters across the provinces, gladiators fought for glory and survival. Families gathered in baths where warm waters soothed and conversations flowed. Roman citizens enjoyed rights and protections, while conquered peoples slowly absorbed Roman culture. Yet not all was calm. On the edges of the empire, legions stood guard. In Germania, in Britannia, in the deserts of the east, Rome pushed its boundaries, but not without resistance. In the Teutoburg forest, in 9 AD, 3 Roman legions were ambushed and destroyed, a reminder that even Rome had limits. Still, the Golden Age endured. Augustus ruled for more than 40 years. When he died in 14 AD, the empire mourned. The Senate declared him a god, and his successors carried on the imperial tradition he had created. The Julio-Claudian dynasty followed: Tiberius, Caligula, Claudius, and Nero. Some were capable, others cruel. Caligula was infamous for madness, Claudius for wisdom, and Nero for excess. Yet through good emperors and bad, the empire remained strong. Its system of law, roads, and administration carried it forward. The first century after Augustus was a time of growth, splendor, and transformation. Rome reached from the Atlantic Ocean to the Euphrates River, from the sands of Africa to the highlands of Scotland. It was a world empire, a civilization of stone, law, and power. But with greatness came new challenges. How could one man rule lands so vast? How could emperors maintain loyalty across continents? The seeds of Rome's future struggles were already being sown. After Augustus, the empire entered a new rhythm of life. Each emperor left his mark, for better or worse. But across the first 2 centuries, Rome experienced what later historians would call its Golden Age. The empire expanded under strong rulers like Trajan. Born in Spain, Trajan became one of the most respected emperors. He led Rome to its greatest territorial extent, conquering Dacia in modern Romania and pushing into Mesopotamia. In his reign, Rome's borders stretched wider than ever before. an empire of nearly 70 million souls. Trajan was not only a conqueror, he built monuments that still stand. The Grand Trajan's Forum, Trajan's Column, telling in carved stone the story of his victories. He cared for the people, creating programs to help poor children and building infrastructure that strengthened Rome's heart. His successor, Hadrian, chose a different path. Instead of endless conquest, Hadrian consolidated the empire. He traveled across provinces, visiting soldiers and citizens alike, ensuring loyalty and stability. In Britain, he ordered the construction of Hadrian's Wall, a massive barrier to mark the northern limit of Roman power. In Greece, he admired culture and learning, supporting arts and philosophy. The Antonine emperors who followed, Antoninus Pius and Marcus Aurelius, continued this stability. The empire was wealthy, orderly, and at peace, a rare era in human history. This was Rome at its height, not only of power, but of civilization. Law, architecture, literature, and philosophy flourished. Roman roads, aqueducts, and cities stitched the provinces into a network of culture and trade. But even in times of light, shadows gather. The empire faced pressures. Barbarian tribes tested its frontiers, the cost of armies grew, and plagues swept through the population. Under Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor, Rome endured wars against Germanic tribes and a devastating epidemic that killed millions. Marcus, writing in his Meditations, reflected on duty, endurance, and the fleeting nature of life. He embodied the Stoic spirit, calm amid storms. Yet his death in 180 AD marked a turning point. His son Commodus inherited the throne, but lacked his father's wisdom. Where Marcus was disciplined, Commodus was reckless. He fancied himself a gladiator, fighting in the arena, shocking the Roman elite. Corruption spread, the Senate grew weak, and the imperial court was filled with intrigue. The Golden Age was dimming. The 3rd century brought crisis. Emperors rose and fell with dizzying speed. In less than 50 years, Rome saw dozens of rulers, many killed by rivals or their own soldiers. Civil war, invasions, economic collapse. This was the century of chaos. Barbarian tribes crossed the Rhine and the Danube, pressing deep into Roman lands. Persian kings challenged Rome in the east, capturing even a Roman emperor, Valerian, and displaying him as a prisoner. Meanwhile, inflation ravaged the economy. Silver coins were debased, prices soared, and trust in currency crumbled. Cities shrank, trade faltered, and once mighty Rome staggered under the weight of its troubles. Still, Rome did not fall. From the turmoil emerged strong leaders like Aurelian, who reunited the empire, driving back invaders and restoring stability. Walls rose around Rome itself, mighty fortifications built to defend the eternal city from threats. For a time, strength returned. But the empire was not the same as before. The old republic had long been gone, and now even the stable empire of Augustus and Trajan was fading. Rome was harder to govern, more divided, and more vulnerable. The age of glory had passed into an age of survival. The 3rd century had shaken Rome to its core, but from chaos came reform. In the late 200s, a new emperor arose, Diocletian. Strong, disciplined, and ruthless, he sought to save the empire from collapse. Diocletian realized that Rome had grown too vast for one man to rule. So he created the Tetrarchy, rule by 4. The empire was divided into East and West, each with its own senior and junior emperor. This system brought stability. Borders were secured, armies reorganized, taxes enforced with new order. Rome had survived the storm. But Diocletian's reign was not without cruelty. He imposed strict controls, fixing prices and professions, binding farmers to their land. And he launched one of the fiercest persecutions of Christians, seeing the new faith as a threat to imperial unity. Many believers were imprisoned, tortured, or killed. Yet instead of fading, Christianity grew stronger, its followers unshaken. When Diocletian retired, one of the few emperors to step down willingly, the system began to crack. Ambition returned, generals clashed, and civil war erupted once again. From this turmoil, a new figure rose: Constantine. Constantine was a commander of immense skill and vision. In 312 AD, at the Battle of the Milvian Bridge, he claimed to have seen a sign in the sky, a cross of light with the words, "In this sign, conquer." He ordered his soldiers to bear the Christian symbol, and he triumphed over his rival Maxentius. With Constantine, Christianity moved from persecuted faith to imperial power. In 313, he issued the Edict of Milan, granting freedom of worship throughout the empire. Churches were built openly, bishops gained influence, and the once hidden religion spread rapidly. Constantine also transformed the empire itself. He chose a new capital in the east, Byzantium, renamed Constantinople. Strongly fortified and placed at the crossroads of Europe and Asia, it became the heart of the Eastern Roman Empire. From this city, emperors would rule for 1,000 years more. Though Constantine strengthened the empire, the West grew weaker. Wealth and power shifted eastward, leaving Rome itself vulnerable. The city that had once ruled the world was now only one capital among many. Constantine died in 337, baptized as a Christian on his deathbed. His legacy was profound. He reshaped the empire and laid the foundation for Christian Europe. But unity remained fragile. His sons quarreled, borders were threatened, and the empire edged ever closer to division. By the late 4th century, new storms gathered. Barbarian tribes pressed harder at the frontiers. The Visigoths, fleeing from the Huns, sought refuge inside Roman borders. Mistreatment and neglect turned them into enemies. In 378, at the Battle of Adrianople, the Eastern Emperor Valens faced the Goths. The Roman army was crushed, the emperor killed, a devastating blow that shook the empire. This battle revealed a harsh truth. Rome was no longer invincible. Its armies, once the terror of the world, could now be broken. The road to decline had begun. By the dawn of the 5th century, the empire was divided, east and west. The eastern half, ruled from Constantinople, was wealthier and stronger. The western half, with Rome, Milan, and later Ravenna as its centers, was poorer, weaker, and constantly under attack. In 410 AD, disaster struck. The Visigoths, led by their king Alaric, marched on Rome itself. The Eternal City, which had not fallen to a foreign enemy in 800 years, was sacked. For 3 days, the Goths plundered its treasures. Though the city survived, the shock was immense. Rome, once master of the world, was now vulnerable. The empire staggered on, but new enemies came. The Vandals crossed from Spain into North Africa, seizing Carthage and cutting Rome off from its vital grain supply. From their new base, they launched raids by sea. In 455, they sacked Rome again, stripping the city of wealth. The name Vandal would forever be linked with destruction. Then came perhaps the greatest threat of all, the Huns. Led by the fearsome Attila, they swept across Europe, their horsemen striking terror wherever they rode. In 452, Attila marched into Italy. Though Rome was spared, the threat was so dire that the Pope himself, Leo the Great, went out to meet Attila and persuaded him to turn back. The Western Empire was exhausted, its resources drained, its armies stretched thin. Meanwhile, the East endured. Protected by wealth and strong walls, Constantinople withstood attacks. But the West crumbled. Emperors rose and fell in rapid succession, often puppets of powerful generals or barbarian warlords. The Senate was powerless, the legions unreliable. Finally, in 476 AD, the end came. The Germanic leader, Odoacer, deposed the boy emperor Romulus Augustulus. He sent the imperial regalia to Constantinople, declaring there would be no more emperors in the West. Rome had fallen. Yet even in its fall, Rome left behind a vast legacy. Its roads, aqueducts, laws, and language endured. The idea of Rome lived on, in the church, in the Eastern Empire, and in the dreams of medieval kings who called themselves Caesars. The Western Roman Empire was gone, but the spirit of Rome would never fully die. Though the Western Empire had fallen, the East endured. From its shining capital, Constantinople, the Eastern Roman Empire, later known as the Byzantine Empire, stood strong. Its walls, built by Theodosius, towered above the sea and land approaches. For centuries, invaders came against them, but the city held. The Eastern emperors were not merely soldiers, they were administrators, diplomats, and guardians of Roman tradition. They preserved Roman law, codified in the great Corpus Juris Civilis of Justinian. They maintained the imperial courts, the Senate, and the rituals that stretched back to ancient Rome. And yet, they adapted, blending Greek culture, Christian faith, and Roman discipline into something new. In the 6th century, Justinian the Great dreamed of reconquering the West. His brilliant general, Belisarius, marched into North Africa, Italy, and even captured Rome itself. For a brief moment, it seemed that the old empire might be restored. But wars, plagues, and new invasions drained the treasury. The dream of reunification faded, and the East turned inward, focusing on survival. The Byzantines faced constant challenges. From the East came the Persians, and later the rising power of Islam. From the north came Slavs and Bulgars. From the west came ambitious rivals seeking the wealth of Constantinople. Yet the empire endured, sometimes shrinking, sometimes resurging, for nearly 1,000 years after Rome's fall. The Byzantine Empire became a beacon of learning, art, and faith. Magnificent churches like Hagia Sophia rose, their domes reaching toward heaven. Monks preserved ancient manuscripts, copying works of Greek and Roman philosophy that might otherwise have been lost. Diplomats spun webs of alliances, while emperors ruled with both cunning and ceremony. Still, the city of Rome itself never regained its old power. It became the seat of the Pope, spiritual leader of Western Christianity. But the empire's political heart now beat in Constantinople. The East was Roman in name, but transformed in spirit. For centuries more, the Eastern Empire carried the torch of Rome. But eventually, even Constantinople would face its own fall in 1453, long after the Western Empire had vanished. By then, Rome's shadow stretched across all of Europe and beyond. And so, the story of Rome comes to its quiet end. From a small village by the Tiber River, it rose to rule the known world. It brought roads, laws, and culture that still touch our lives today. And though the empire itself has long since faded, its memory endures, a reminder of both the greatness and the fragility of human achievement. As you rest now, let the echoes of Rome drift gently away. Imagine the silent ruins standing under the moonlight, the Colosseum, once filled with roaring crowds, now quiet and timeless. The roads that once carried legions now stretch into the stillness of night. History itself becomes a lullaby, carrying you softly towards sleep. Thank you for joining this journey through time. If you found peace in this story, I invite you to return again, for there are countless more tales waiting in history's embrace. For now, close your eyes, breathe deeply, and let go. May your dreams be calm, your rest be deep, and may the lessons of the past guide you gently into tomorrow. Good night.